Hi guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel, Books with Brie. I'm Brianne, and today I am going to be giving you guys some of my more cohesive and final thoughts on my first read of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Alright, to start this little book talk and review off, I am going to just read you guys the summary of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo because I think it does the best job at explaining it and leaving the twists still unknown and such a surprise for later on. Aging and reclusive Hollywood movie icon Evelyn Hugo is finally ready to tell the truth about her glamorous and scandalous life. But when she chooses unknown magazine reporter Monique Grant for the job, no one is more astounded than Monique herself. Why her? Why now? Monique is not exactly on top of the world. Her husband has left her and her professional life is going nowhere. Regardless of why Evelyn has selected her to write her biography, Monique is determined to use this opportunity to jumpstart her career. Summoned to Evelyn's luxurious apartment, Monique listens in fascination as the actress tells her story from making her way to Los Angeles in the 1950s to her decision to leave show business in the 80s, and of course the seven husbands along the way. Evelyn unspools a tale of ruthless ambition, unexpected friendship, and a great forbidden love. Monique begins to feel a very real connection to the legendary star, but as Evelyn's story nears its conclusion, it becomes clear that her life intersects with Monique's own in tragic and irreversible ways. Right, so the next part of this book review, since this is a Kindle read, I was able to highlight some of my favorite phrases and just like catch me phrases. I don't believe any of them are spoilery, so I would like to share those with you guys here. So the first quote that I highlighted was in chapter 4, and it reads, "When you're given an opportunity to change your life, be ready to do whatever it takes to make it happen. The world doesn't give things, you take things. If you learn one thing from me, it should probably be that." I really thought that was amazing, and it works very well with the story that is being told. The next thing I highlighted was chapter 12, "But the truth is, praise is just like an addiction. The more you get it, the more of it you need just to stay even." Now, this can be true, but I think everyone needs some sort of praise every once in a while. The next thing I ended up highlighting was chapter 14. "You have to find a job that makes your heart feel big instead of one that makes it feel small." And personally, that's just a little reminder to like stick with what you always dreamed of doing, because like your passions, that's what makes your heart go out and actually is what you tend to be best at. And then in chapter 21, I highlighted, "Sometimes reality comes crashing down on you. Other times reality simply waits patiently for you to run out of the energy it takes to deny it." I think everyone in their life at some point has an experience that makes them think of emotions that relate to that quote, where reality can either be very harsh or you don't realize the reality of a situation until you're ready to realize it, and that's just kind of how life is sometimes. And then in chapter 28, I highlighted it because I just thought it was kind of cool. "If only they gave out Oscars for this shit." I laughed my ass off when I read this quote and when I read it in the context of the book. Amazing, perfectly placed, and Taylor Jenkins Reid knows how to do humor. Chapter 29, I highlighted, "You do not know how fast you have been running, how hard you have been working, how truly exhausted you are, until someone stands behind you and says, 'It's okay, you can fall down now, I'll catch you.'" This quote was the first thing in this book that made me cry. And there are so many chapters in this book. This was so early on to start crying, but it hit a heartstring, and I don't even think I can like explain in words why it hit me. It just did, and I feel like in the context that it was placed, it did such an amazing job. Then the last thing I highlighted was chapter 69. It says, when you dig just the tiniest bit beneath the surface, everyone's love life is original and interesting and nuanced and defies an easy definition. I personally thought that that was actually really touching, to think that no one's love is the same, because really nobody loves the same as someone else, and even if it's similar, it's not going to be the same, and that really makes a difference. Alright, so at this point, I will be going into spoilers, so if you have not read it yet, please leave, and just know I wholeheartedly loved this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was between 4 and 5, and my gut reaction was just a 4-star, because when I thought back about it later, there was just some things that didn't sit right with me that will be talked about here in the spoilers. But if you don't want any spoilers, just know it was an amazing read. It was so emotional, and it does an amazing job with the topics that it touches on, and I recommend this for anyone. Really, it does such a good job. Alright, so I'm going to look at my list. I got a list. This book hurt. I needed to talk. So I created a whole list. So the first kind of topic I want to touch on, that this book does touch on, is self-love and acceptance of who you are as a person. So throughout the entire novel, Evelyn goes through this thing where she doesn't really understand who she is, and then she does, and then life takes and like turns her around in a whole 180, and she's lost again, and really, that's kind of really realistic. She throws herself into her first marriage, moves herself away from her abusive father, and all the way to New York, where she wants to be, where her mother wanted to be before she died, of course. And then life throws Don Adler at her second husband, and then life throws a curveball at her with who Don Adler is. Asshole. I want to beat him up. I don't like Don Adler. He started off as an okay guy, but it went down south real quick. And then life throws Celia St. James at Evelyn. Ooh! Story is so much better from there. Alright. And she really does just a really great job at kind of what is the word? She does a great job in making herself comfortable in new situations and just learning how to live in those situations. I can't think of the word. I know there's a word for this. Oh well, moving on. She does a great job in that, and I think a lot of people could learn from that, but there are some things she could have done differently and how she could have reacted differently. But her past does play a big role in how she does react and how she acts in the situation she's put in. And so the next topic I want to touch on is realizing that there are different types of love in the world and relationships. And so while we follow Evelyn through her 7 husbands and the love of her life, she realizes she had 3 loves of her life. One, the big love of her life, the passion and everything, was Celia St. James, and that was just, there was so much emotion there. And then there was Harry Cameron, her 5th husband, her best friend, who she married, A, to save her reputation, to be with Celia, and so he could be with Celia's husband. You get me there? And then the 3rd love of her life was her daughter Connor Cameron, who she has with Harry, because they both end up wanting a child, and once Connor is born, Evelyn's world is just flipped. She is absolutely in love with her daughter, and there's this one quote in the book where her and Harry are talking, and they mention how Connor is the exception to everything. They will do anything and everything in their power to make sure Connor has everything and anything she could ever need. And I think that is a beautiful message. Next is, if you want something, you fight for it, but sometimes you need to stop fighting. So I could have worded it that better. I should have said something along the lines of sometimes not fighting is the best way to win, because this entire book, Evelyn is fighting to keep her relationship with Celia hidden because it's not safe. Because in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, it is so unsafe to be in any sort of LGBT relationship. And as the book progresses and they're older and it's catching up to present date, Evelyn just kind of stops caring and tries to stop fighting to hide it, and really that's when she gets to be with Celia and be the most her she can be. So I mean, like, sometimes not fighting is the best way to win a fight. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you just gotta go with it. Go with it. Okay. The last one I have down is, it's okay to admit you're wrong, that you can be blamed, and that you are for blame. So the entire book, Evelyn's got this kind of persona and idea that, okay, I'm doing what I'm doing for this reason, and I'm willing to explain it to someone if they really want to know, but if they just can't understand it or accept it, then I don't need them. Well, some of the stuff she does is kind of really fucked up. It's just saying, it kind of really is. Like, she elopes, sleeps with the guy, and annuls a marriage the next day just to hide her relationship with Celia. Big wowzer. She ends up faking and acting in an explicit sex scene with her second ex-husband while with Celia again. The first time she ended up pregnant, she got rid of the baby, of course, and then Celia hadn't realized, like, that Evelyn actually slept with the guy, and Celia left her for that. 5 years goes by before they see each other again and get back together. And then there's when she has the sex scene. Woo, that's a big one. The first time, Evelyn doesn't chase after Celia because she's still learning. She's like, I didn't know it was okay to admit that you were wrong and chase after them and, like, beg for what you wanted. Then when Celia leaves her the second time after she does the explicit sex scene with her ex-husband, she chases after Celia. She finds from in New York, where Celia is in LA, down to her hotel room number, flies out there, knocks on her door, gets on her knees, and starts crying to Celia in the hallway, and admits how wrong she was. Still didn't work out for her, but that's besides the point. She learns, and that's really what matters, is she learned, and not every time you learn a lesson does it work in your favor. It just doesn't always happen like that. Okay, so I do have a few critiques that I did not write down because I kind of just want to think through them as I'm talking to you guys about them, about, like, what just didn't sit right in the book for me. So the whole book is supposed to be taking place in present day and then following the format of Evelyn telling Monique her life story. Sometimes it feels like Evelyn's life story is more forefront than Monique's life in present day, and I didn't really feel a connection to Monique until the very end of the book, which is kind of disappointing to me because I thought since she was a writer, she was the main character, I was going to be able to connect with her quicker. I actually connected with Evelyn and her husband's a lot quicker than I did with Monique. A little disappointing, but it's something I could get past. What I really loved though about like the whole present day aspect of it was Monique's mother. She is more of a teenager and she's got that bubbly personality that really ties humor in with Monique's kind of depressing personality, because she starts off like really sad and like depressed because her marriage failed too. Yeah, but we get like all these phone call conversations between Monique and her mother and text message conversation. It's just so funny because her mom's always kind of like, should I come out and visit you? Monique says yes, and her mother goes, good, because I already booked the ticket. Kind of thing. I love it. It's kind of sweet. It's really funny. I enjoyed that aspect of it. Another thing I did not enjoy particularly was how self-righteous Evelyn was. I think there could have been some more human aspects to her to start with, especially because she was so young in the beginning of her telling the biography, like in the beginning of her story where she starts. She could have been presented as a little more human than she was. Like, she grew up in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood in New York in the 50s. That is so bad. It was not a good neighborhood at that point. It was, her mother was dead. She was living with an abusive father who she was scared of. But she's presented as marrying a guy at 14 because she lied saying she was 16 so she could get to Hollywood. And then when she leaves her first husband because that's what her agent tells her to do, she doesn't really have any sort of pain towards it because she ends up being married to him for like 3 years. That's a decent amount of time. You develop some sort of emotion towards that person, and it just wasn't there. It could have been fleshed out a little more. And then there were points in the book where I felt like it kind of just dragged on. In my personal opinion, I would have been okay if Evelyn had just been the main character and it had started telling her story as the novel and ended when she got with Celia the first time. Though I did enjoy watching her different relationships and all of it grow, I think it could have been even better if she kind of stopped it. Sure, I wouldn't have gotten as emotional and like attached to these characters, but I think the plot wouldn't have felt like it was dragging on if it had just stopped. Could have been marketed as simply a romance instead of any sort of like contemporary. But that's just my opinion. So overall, I gave the book a 4 out of 5 stars. I said that earlier, but it was really between 4 and 5 stars. I sobbed so many times during this book, and it was just kind of a gut reaction. I went with my gut. I went, okay, is it 4 or 5? It said 4. So I went with 4. Because there were things, looking back now, that really broke the book for me from being a 5-star, but it is on a list of favorites that I have read in 2020. Because I have read so much in 2020, and this is an absolute favorite. Because there are some I have DNF'd, there are some that I enjoyed, but didn't get any connection. There's ones like this, and then there's ones that break me entirely. Alright guys, that was it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know down in the comment section below either some book recommendations that you have for me or some thoughts you have on The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.